Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are going to completely shatter basically everything you thought you knew about learning, studying, and what it actually takes to master a new skill. We're diving into the groundbreaking research from the book Make It Stick, and honestly, your brain is about to get a serious paradigm-shifting workout. Let's get into it. So, here's the harsh truth right up front. Pretty much everything you were taught about studying is wrong. Yeah, I know. It causes some serious cognitive dissonance, right? All those lifelong habits, the tried and true methods you've relied on to ace tests in school or pick up professional skills in your career, they're actually based on a massive misconception about how human memory works. We've all been completely misled by what just feels productive. But today, we're setting the record straight. Think about the classics. Rereading your notes over and over, buying expensive textbooks just to highlight them in like 5 different neon colors, cramming frantically the night before an exam, or mass practice where you just drill one single skill for hours on end. I mean, we all do these things. And why? Because they feel good. They give us this warm, fuzzy sensation of learning. But here's the kicker. Cognitive science shows these feel-good, passive habits are actually doing active harm to our long-term memory. They create an illusion. Which brings us to our first section, the illusion of learning, and exactly why the familiar feels so much like mastery. Our main villain in this story is a little something called fluency. Fluency is basically this incredibly deceptive feeling of knowing something. It happens when material becomes really familiar just through passive exposure. Like when you reread a chapter for the 3rd time, the text gets super easy to process, right? Your brain goes, yeah, I recognize this. I totally know it. But it's tricking you. Confusing that simple familiarity with actual hard-earned mastery is literally the #1 reason we fail to learn effectively. See, there's a massive difference between the superficial comfort of recognition and the deep structural reality of active recall. Recognition is passive. It's familiar, sure, but it is incredibly temporary. Active recall, on the other hand, actually requires effort. It's deep, it's durable. The big takeaway here is that our subjective feelings are just terrible judges of our actual learning. Just because reading something feels smooth and effortless absolutely does not mean it's actually sticking in your brain. Okay, moving into section 2, let's look at exactly why popular methods fail, or as I like to call it, the trap of passive exposure. So it might be time to toss those highlighters in the trash. When you rely on passive study methods, you're getting zero active retrieval. None. You're just engaging in shallow processing, which only optimizes for short-term performance. You know the drill. You pass the test on Thursday, and you've completely forgotten everything by Friday night. And worst of all, this surface-level knowledge evaporates almost instantly the second you're placed in a new context. Why? Because you aren't forcing your brain to actually construct knowledge or make those deep, lasting connections. We also need to completely bust the myth of massed practice. That's when you drill one single skill over and over again until you nail it. Sure, it gives you rapid gains, but they fade so incredibly fast. It feels really rewarding in the moment, but it's a trap. What actually works is varied practice. That means intentionally mixing different skills or topics together. The gains are definitely slower, and man, it feels terribly inefficient at the time. But your brain has to work so much harder to figure out which solution to apply, not just how to apply it. And that builds true, transferable mastery. Oh, and before we move on, we have got to talk about the learning styles myth. How many times have you heard someone say, oh, I'm a visual learner, or I need to hear it, I'm an auditory learner? Well, actually, scratch that. Hundreds of rigorous studies have shown absolutely zero benefit to matching instruction to a supposed style. It's actually the content itself that dictates the best way to learn, not your personal preference. I mean, if you're trying to learn the shape of a country, literally everyone needs a visual map, regardless of their supposed style, right? All right, let's get into the fix. Section 3, the power of retrieval and active construction. 36%. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is an absolutely abysmal retention rate. In a major cognitive study, that was literally all the information students retained a week after simply restudying a passage 4 times. 4 separate study sessions of just reading, and they still lost almost 2/3 of the material. Now compare that to 80%. That is the retention rate for a group that studied the exact same material just once, but then actively took 4 tests on it. Just once. 4 tests produced more than twice the retention of 4 study sessions. They pulled the information out rather than trying to continually cram it in, and honestly, the results speak for themselves. So why does retrieval work like magic? Well, when you force yourself to pull information out of your brain, you are physically strengthening neural pathways. It's kind of like paving a dirt road into a superhighway. Plus, it instantly reveals your hidden knowledge gaps. You find out what you actually don't know before it's too late. It also creates multiple retrieval cues and forces memory reconsolidation. Basically, the mechanical act of pulling information out is vastly more effective than trying to endlessly stuff it back in. Let's put this into action with a super practical step-by-step guide you can literally use today. Step 1, read the material. Step 2, close the book. I know, this is the hardest part. Step 3, write down everything you can possibly remember. Step 4, open the book back up and check for your gaps. If you start applying this self-quizzing to your daily life, you'll notice a struggle in step 3. That friction, that feeling of desperately grasping for the answer, that is the exact moment actual learning is taking place. Which perfectly sets up section 4. The spaced repetition effect, or, counterintuitively, the power of forgetting. Forgetting is not failure. It is part of learning. I really want us to completely shift our paradigm here. We usually totally panic when we feel ourselves forgetting a fact or a concept, right? But cognitive science shows that allowing yourself to forget material between study sessions is actually a mandatory trigger. When you let yourself forget just a little bit and then force yourself to relearn it, you cement those brain pathways so much deeper than if you had just reviewed it nonstop. So if you visualize expanding your review intervals, say reviewing something after 1 day, then waiting 3 days, then a week, 2 weeks, and eventually a whole month, you are actively forcing your brain to effortfully relearn the material. You aren't just memorizing for tomorrow's meeting. You're sending a loud and clear message to your brain. Hey, we keep needing this information over time, so you'd better store it permanently. Let's pull all these threads together into one massive concept in Section 5, embracing desirable difficulties. Desirable difficulties. It's such an awesome term. These are strategic challenges introduced into your learning process that feel way harder in the moment, but produce vastly better, more durable outcomes. Think of effective techniques, like using hard-to-read fonts, mixing up your practice topics, or spacing out your review, as a kind of tough medicine. You're intentionally using friction to build up your mental muscle. But hey, a quick caveat here. Not all difficulty is good difficulty. You really need to find the sweet spot. You want to calibrate the challenge so it's tough but achievable. It should be just slightly beyond what you can do easily right now. You're aiming for that specific zone where you really have to stretch and search your memory, but without hitting a wall of total overwhelm where your brain just completely shuts down. And when you finally embrace this kind of strategic struggle, the benefits are just unbelievable. First off, it completely prevents that mindless autopilot mode. It engages so many more of your cognitive resources. It also helps you build coherent, flexible mental models instead of just memorizing a bunch of isolated, random facts. But maybe most importantly, it develops lifelong metacognition. That's the profound self-awareness that turns you into a master learner for the rest of your life. You literally learn how to learn. So, as we wrap up this explainer, you really have a choice to make. Will you keep choosing the comfortable illusion of fluency, or will you embrace the struggle of true mastery? I challenge you today to abandon those easy passive habits. Stop just rereading. Ditch the highlighters. Intentionally choose the friction, the self-testing, and the spaced repetition that genuine growth actually requires. Because I promise you, once you embrace the struggle and actually make the knowledge stick, there is absolutely no limit to what you can learn.
Okay, let's kick things off with a pretty tough question. Honestly, ask yourself, are you practicing for fluency or are you practicing for mastery? Because as we'll see throughout this explainer, the strategies that feel the absolute most productive, the ones where everything just clicks and feels totally smooth, they're actually tricking you. They usually just create a temporary illusion of learning. True mastery, it looks and feels completely different.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. Advanced strategies for mastery. 2. Mixing it up with interleaving. 3. Building connections with elaboration. 4. Calibrating your true knowledge. 5. Mindset and deliberate practice. And finally, 6. Your practical learning blueprint. Let's get right into Section 1, Advanced Strategies for Mastery. The whole foundational premise of Part 2 is that genuine learning literally requires introducing what researchers call desirable difficulties. Basically, these are strategic hurdles that stop you from going on autopilot, forcing your brain to process things much more deeply.
Moving on to Section 2, Mixing it up with interleaving. This is where we completely challenge that deeply ingrained habit of practicing just one specific thing over and over until it feels perfect.
The alternative is something called interleaving, and this just means mixing different types of problems or skills into a single study session, rather than zeroing in on one type at a time. Now, I know this feels incredibly messy. Honestly, it can be downright infuriating because it constantly disrupts your rhythm. But here's the thing. It forces you to practice the absolutely crucial real-world skill of discriminating between different types of problems, rather than just blindly plugging in the same formula.
The data on this is just wild. There was this fascinating study of math students. One group used massed practice, so doing 20 algebra problems in a row. The other used interleaved practice, mixing up algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. Initially, the massed practice students felt way faster and way more accurate. But get this, on a test a week later, the interleaved group performed a staggering 43% better. They didn't just learn how to execute a strategy, they actually learned when to use it.
Closely related to interleaving is varied practice. This is when you practice a skill in different contexts or with different variations instead of just repeating the exact same version. It essentially stops your brain from overfitting a skill to one highly specific scenario. It's kind of like how a pilot doesn't just train in perfectly clear weather, right? They need flexible knowledge to handle unexpected turbulence in the real world. A real-world study with kids throwing beanbags brilliantly illustrates this. One group practiced throwing from a fixed distance. Another group practiced throwing from varied distances. But interestingly, none of those practice distances were the actual test distance. Unbelievably, the kids who practiced at varied distances ended up outperforming the kids who had exclusively practiced at the exact test distance. The variation forced their brains to grasp the underlying physics of throwing, rather than just memorizing a single motor movement.
All right, Section 3, Building Connections with Elaboration. So now that we're mixing up our practice, we have to talk about how we integrate those new facts into a meaningful web of knowledge.
You can't just leave facts floating around in your brain in isolation. You have to use elaboration. This is the process of giving new material actual meaning by putting it into your own words and hooking it onto things you already know. For example, if a medical student connects a brand new anatomical structure to a disease pathology they already understand, they're creating multiple retrieval routes in their brain. It's like turning a single isolated string into a massive, interconnected net. You can actually build this right into a simple, actionable sequence. Step 1, encounter the material, read it or solve it. Step 2, self-explain it. Literally talk through the steps out loud to yourself. Step 3, relate it to something familiar. And Step 4, generate your very own original example. Trying to invent an answer or an example before you even feel fully ready is a game changer. It primes your brain to absorb the concept so much more deeply.
Section 4. Calibrating your true knowledge. This brings us to a pretty major reality check in this explainer. Your brain is notoriously terrible at judging what it actually knows.
There's a great quote from the research. Ease of processing is not the same as strength of memory. We all do this. We constantly confuse that warm, familiar feeling of rereading a textbook chapter with the actual mastery needed to pull that information from scratch when we're under pressure. Familiarity is definitely not mastery. So how do we fix this miscalibration? You have to use frequent, low-stakes testing as a diagnostic tool. You should be constantly asking yourself, if I had to teach this concept to a total stranger right this second without glancing at my notes, could I do it? Testing yourself gives you hard, objective feedback on what you can actually retrieve, instantly snapping you out of that illusion of knowing. Section 5, Mindset and Deliberate Practice. Now, voluntarily putting yourself through all these frustrating tests and messy interleaved practice sessions, that requires a very specific psychological approach. Recognizing that testing reveals your current gaps, rather than some kind of permanent lack of intelligence, is a huge mental shift. It perfectly mirrors Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset. When you realize that learning is literally the physical creation of new neural connections, you adopt a growth mindset. You start embracing the frustration of spaced repetition. A fixed mindset sees struggle as a red flag that you just aren't smart enough. But a growth mindset, it knows that struggle is the exact mechanism that strengthens the brain. The key takeaway here is that learning is a form of deliberate practice. Think about a virtuoso violinist. They use deliberate practice to drill their absolute weakest transitions over and over. In the same way, you have to use these difficult cognitive strategies to target your own learning gaps. You've got to operate just beyond your current ability, demand your own full concentration, and aggressively seek out immediate feedback.
Section 6. Your Practical Learning Blueprint. Let's bring all this advanced theory back down to earth and fire off some quick, practical applications tailored for whatever you're trying to learn right now.
If you're a student, ditch the highlighters today. I know they feel productive, but they aren't doing much. Instead, completely close your book and try to write out summaries strictly from memory. That's active recall. Mix up your problem sets so you never know what formula is coming next, even if it drives you crazy at first. And whatever you do, space out your studying over days and weeks. Absolutely no cramming. For the teachers watching, the data is super clear. You should be implementing frequent, ungraded formative assessments. Try starting your classes with quick, low-stakes quizzes on old material. Make sure your unit tests pull cumulative questions from months ago to force that spaced retrieval. And honestly, maybe the most important thing, explicitly teach your students these exact study strategies so they understand exactly why your class feels challenging.
And if you're a professional or self-learner tackling a new skill, intentionally vary where and how you practice. Start heavily utilizing spaced repetition software like Anki to cement technical knowledge for good. Don't just watch a tutorial and nod along. Immediately try to build or apply what you just saw without looking back at the instructions. Ultimately, the biggest thing to take away from this explainer is this. If your studying feels smooth, fast, and effortless, you probably aren't actually growing. Ease is a warning sign. Real, durable learning happens right out there at the edge of your ability. Embrace the struggle because that's the only place flexible mastery is built. So, I'll leave you with this. What specific difficulty are you going to intentionally add to your learning process tomorrow?